Alright, so hey everyone, today I want to take a look at the Deadzones for Splatoon's thumbstick controls. So horizontally, this uses a 25% Deadzone. This game's Deadzones are axial and actually rectangular specifically, so it's 25% horizontally, but 35% vertically. Now 25% is a pretty common Deadzone size, but it is very large. You can see just how much stick movement you can make without anything occurring in game. And because of its shape, you have to move further diagonally, and in this case vertically as well. So this can really influence your ability to make precise adjustments. Being axial, this has a side effect of restricting angles all throughout the axis. So in this case, you can see I can make these large vertical bobbing motions, and the camera will move only perfectly horizontally. You don't start seeing diagonal movement until you break into these green regions. And of course this applies vertically as well. Diagonal movement begins pretty slow horizontally, so you'll see more aliasing on objects rather than the movement specifically. The issue here is that the angles you move the stick in aren't the ones that are being output to the camera. So if I, of course, move at a very obvious angle like this, I'm moving perfectly horizontally. So that makes all your angular movement incorrect because all your diagonals are essentially scrunched into this range. I didn't test the acceleration curve, but the reason will be made clear in just a second. You can see that the acceleration begins pretty slowly and then builds up smoothly up until its maximum turn rate. There's no jump in acceleration or anything like that. But I didn't test it because the vertical acceleration is significantly different. You can see that this is how slow you begin horizontally, but vertically it's quite a bit faster. And aside from just making vertical movements feel quite a bit more sensitive than horizontal ones, this also has an effect on your diagonal movement. So it puts a bias on all your diagonals vertically. So if I moved right here, which should be a very subtle diagonal, it's actually quite a bit more dramatic. And if I say move at a 45-degree relative to this, which would be like a stick positioning right here, you can see that that's almost a vertical movement. So your angles are not only affected by the heavy restriction by the axial Deadzone, but all the angles you do have access to, or all the diagonals you do have access to, are heavily vertically influenced. So pretty much your diagonal movement is just incorrect all around. So this makes it so that when you're playing and trying to track players, if I wanted to say track someone up this slope, I could try and then point at what I would think is a correct direction on my stick and then fall under them or skate over them because of the stronger vertical acceleration. Movement is pretty similar. It's a 25% square Deadzone, and you won't really see this because movement starts so slow, but if I move far enough you can see that it does begin rotating you in that direction, and you do move in that direction. This threshold right here just indicates the when the walk animation begins. You otherwise have a smooth gradient between moving extremely slow to your full paced run. And you have the same restricted angles here, so within these blue regions you can only move in one of 4 directions. And both for the movement and the camera, it'd be much better for to use a circular Deadzone. This is less important for the movement because you don't need as much accuracy, but the camera issues are pretty significant. Another thing I want to reference isn't really an issue with Splatoon's controls specifically, but just very poor practice by Nintendo. So one of the things that Nintendo does, at least for the Wii and the Wii U, I don't know if this extends to the Switch, is they've made it so when you sync up a controller to the console or start a game, where your stick is positioned becomes the new center of the thumbstick. So for example, the beginning portion of this video, I made sure that my thumbsticks were perfectly centered before starting the game. But here I've offset, when I synced up the controller, again, I've offset the movement stick to -20, 20 in this direction, and 20 in this direction for the camera. And what that means is that this image of the Deadzone on screen is now going to be inaccurate. It's actually going to be shifted to center around this position. So to demonstrate that, we can see that now moving slightly to the left begins camera movement, but now you have to move significantly further to see right movement. Upward movement requires less input, downward movement requires more. And it's the same Deadzone size, just shifted around here now. And for the movement, we can see this at least horizontally. When the walk animation begins, you can see that it's shifted left, and that it starts much earlier when moving right, it's still shifted left. Now, of course, this is an extreme example. You can see where my stick would normally lean. This, if it was recentered around there, it wouldn't be as noticeable and maybe perfectly unnoticeable by many players. But it really depends on where your stick is positioned. So if you're messing with your thumbsticks when the game's loading up, it's very possible that you could, it can consider this a new center, and then your default position is outside the Deadzone, and you'll begin moving uncontrollably, and you actually, in those more extreme cases, you won't be able to access moving in the opposite direction, which actually is applied here. So you can see that my character can run in this direction at full speed, but they can't when pushing this way, because the Deadzone is offset in this way, and you actually lose values in the direction it's offset. So that's one of the reasons that it's very poor practice. So one is poor practice because having a stick lean is already taken care of by the in-game Deadzone, but you do have issues like you're losing values with this current implementation. So in this case also, like, it might feel more responsive to move left because it's occurring sooner, but less responsive to move right. So even though the Deadzone's the same, certain angles are going to feel more or less responsive being offset like this. So together with Splatoon's own kind of issues with its controls, this can just make it feel quite a bit more sloppy depending on how dramatic the offset is. So that's just not particularly great. Now that about covers the issues. One thing I want to address is Splatoon's kind of become a poster child for popularizing gyro controls, and I have no issue with those controls. But unfortunately, this has been used to kind of re-solidify some of the stigma around how, the inaccuracy argument around controllers, or around thumbsticks. So of course there are comparisons between gyro controls and thumbstick controls, and there's definitely plenty of arguments for gyro, but Splatoon doesn't really work as an accurate comparison between the two because we have good gyro controls compared to quite poor thumbstick controls. It's not exactly a fair comparison there. But just generally, there's it's also been reinforced the thumbstick inaccuracy where Splatoon doesn't use aim assist, and that's been cited as one of the reasons that the controls feel sloppy. That's just the stick controls not being able to exist without aim assist, and players who are complaining about the stick controls were just too used to aim assist, and now they're having to deal with the actual stick controls. And of course, this is treating the stick controls, these issues, as inherent to thumbstick aiming when it's actually just an issue with implementation. But that about covers things. Thanks for watching, and everyone, have a good rest of your day.